Welcome, everyone. This is the Elevate Your Best podcast. My name is Michael Dankloffs of Elevate Your Best.
And I am Bruno Martins from the Cyber Journey. Today, what are we talking about, Michael?
Today, we're actually continuing our talk about the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. We started off with be impeccable with your word. We followed up with don't take anything personally, and then don't make assumptions. The fourth of those 4 agreements is always do your best, which kind of caps off this set of 4 relatively simple things, but may not necessarily be easy.
And that can greatly shift your life for sure.
Absolutely. So we've been talking about these agreements as things that can give you some freedom to be the person that you know you are underneath the agreements that we actually make in other areas of our life. And if that's actually through our experiences, our conditioning, our upbringing, our culture, so that we can really find who we are. And this has been a game changer for me because it's something I've been practicing probably for 20 years now. So that's about 20 years ago is whenever I first read the book, The 4 Agreements. And I think I've read it probably 4 times since then. And this one, always do your best. It's the first level for the name of my business of Elevate Your Best, because we want you to always bring your best in this moment. And then the question is, through using all 4 of these, how do we then elevate it between the times that we show up?
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that you read this book 4 times, Michael. The way I see a book, it's like a conversation that you have with the author. Like me and you, we have several conversations. Now we are talking about do your best. Why to do your best? What is the scenario that involves this idea of elevating your best, doing your best out there, committing to this? And this, if you think, it's like a conversation that you might have with an older, wiser person that comes to you, maybe a teacher or some reference that you have, a mentor, and he says, oh, you should always do your best. And he explains why and his experiences in doing so and how this can transform your life. So it's actually very coherent for me that you have read this book more than one time, because those people that really get like a difference in our life, that shift the direction of our lives, we usually have those conversations with them many times. And I believe that people, they not make this relation.
And I think that there are some books that I certainly have read and it's a one and done. Same thing with interactions with some people. It's a transactional thing that we get out of that transaction what we need to, and so do they. And there's others that, at least for me, that I keep going back to because I know that I'm going to be in a different place whenever I'm reading it a second time. My best is going to be different, which is a lot about what always do your best is about, is that your best is going to be different every single time you show up. A little bit comes back to don't take anything personally as well, is that when I'm bringing my best, depending on how I slept last night, depending on how well I'm eating, depending on whether I broke up with a partner or I've had another problem in my life, a fight with my boss will have an impact on what my best is going to be. So knowing that is the case, how do we set ourselves up to succeed, to bring our best in each moment, knowing that it's going to be different each time?
Yeah, I would like to cover who are the people that are going to this journey of understanding what is your best and giving the best. Before we do that, can I just ask you a question, Michael, related to the books? Because what you say took me in that direction. If you would mention the 3 to 5 books that have the most interesting conversations that you keep going back to for you personally, which ones would you mention here?
So the 2 that come to mind the most is the 4 Agreements, like I said. Also, the 1 Minute Manager is another one that's actually relatively straightforward, but I keep coming back to it because it's a different conversation each time I come back to it. It very much is a book about leadership, a book about how to manage people that are reporting to you. Another one that I've gone back to several different times as well is The 5 Levels of Leadership by John C. Maxwell. Very much was something on my mind as I was leading on a men's team or was heading towards becoming a leader in the men's organization, and wanted to bring that same those same skills of leadership into the work that I was doing for my job. And because for each of these things, it's not, for me, wasn't a one and done thing. It's not something that you check the box and you never have to go back to it. And that really kind of, once again, comes back to this concept of always do your best, because the wisdom that I'm going to gain by taking action on something is going to mean that the next time I do it, I'm going to show up differently.
Yeah, I understand that action is transformation. Action is a transmutation of energy. But even in this book idea, every time you go back into that conversation, you are a different person. You have different perspectives, different experiences and references. And many times in my life, I have experienced things like this. I go to an event, I hear a talk, or I watch a video, I have a conversation, read a book, and I think I understood that idea. But then I go out there and I start to try to make it happen, take action. And then something happens and it dawns on me immediately, clearly, oh, that's what they were talking about. And now I understand that I didn't understand. I just had a faint idea, a shadow, a silhouette, something that resembles what actually it is. And then later, when I take more action and more action, I realize that is another level to what it was said. And sometimes we don't even remember of the conversations. We just move forward and think that it's our own geniosity that bring that to us and forget of the seed that was once planted. For me, the books that I would mention, it would be for sure a book that greatly transformed my life. The How to Win Friends and Influence People from Dale Carnegie. Great book. It changed my life. It was recommended to me. I look at the title and I was like, I don't need this book. If you think you don't need this book, you need this book.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
there's another one that I've gone back to a couple of times as well, and this was just introduced relatively recently. So the 4 Agreements and the 1 Minute Manager. I got the 1 Minute Manager from my parents, actually, almost 25 years ago. It's actually inscribed on the front cover and everything. And the 4 Agreements was about 20 years ago whenever I first started reading it. 5 Levels of Leadership was recent. The other one that I got introduced recently was Essentialism. So in fact, it's here. It's Greg McCowan, and it's really focusing on those things that are essential in your life. And it's very necessary for me to learn that because I have a tendency to want to do all the things. So it's a matter of finding what is absolutely essential in order to get you to your goal, which means that you need to clearly know what your goal is.
Yeah.
So then you can bring your best to taking the steps in order to get to that goal.
Got you. So for me, it would be How to Win Friends, Influence People. Another very important book would be, I don't know if that's the name in English, but you'll probably find it from Dale Carnegie as well. How to Avoid Worries and Live Life, something like that. It's a great book for you to learn. What do you need to worry about? One of the greatest quotes from this book is something like, if you can do something about it, there is no reason to worry because you can do something about it. And if you can't do something about it, there is no reason to worry because you can't do anything about it. And for sure, the compound effect and the power of habits are like essential for me. And I would probably put something like Unleash the Power Within, or the studies on Tony Robbins on how the human being works. Awaken the Giant and the Unleash the Power Within, they talk about the same idea. And Think and Grow Rich, which is very polemic. There's going to be a movie about him. I don't know if you saw it, but the trailer is very fantastic. Very cool. But let's go back to our main train of thought of today. Michael, who are the people that are like in this journey to understand how to do their best?
So I think there's a couple of places where this shows up. So when you are even focusing on what your best is, tends to be people who are committed to growing. But to me, there's this other piece. This is the 4th agreement for a reason, because the first 3 really need to be foundational before we can really even know what our best is. But where I tend to run into this, and I tend to even recoil from it, is two ways. Is there's people who hold back, who don't actually bring their best because either they think that people are going to take advantage of them, or they think that there's not enough. There's this lack mindset. So that's one. Not playing full out is how I've also heard that termed as well. So whenever I go into something, I do my best to put everything I have into it, which when I'm doing as much as I'm doing, putting all I have into everything means that I have a tendency to deplete my cup. But I don't want to hold back on if I need to bring energy to someone or resolve an issue or troubleshoot a problem. I want to bring my best to that. But there's this other mindset too that it's definitely in kind of the athlete space that I hear this, and I also hear it in other spaces as well. As I'm going to give that 110%. I'm going to give that 150%. I'm going to give it 1000%. And I'm like, for me, and this is actually even something that's mentioned in the book, is how can you give 1000% of who you are? If you are actually giving 1000%, that's 10 times more than you have to give. Now, there's a difference to me between giving your best and giving what you perceive is your best. This idea of the limitations you put on yourself. And that's whenever I think that people think that they need to give 150% based on their limiting beliefs of what they think that they can do. But I think that we're get into this and dig into this a little bit more is I'm going to show up in my best in this moment with the resources, knowledge, and energy I have at the time. So that's how I want to bring this forward. And why would we want that?
Yeah, sorry, Michael. But what you say was very important because as an athlete myself, not a professional athlete, like an amateur, I do fight jiu-jitsu. I have won some medals, but I'm not a professional. I don't even have the nutrition necessary to actually say athlete. But okay, I'm an athlete because I'm fighting jiu-jitsu 4 times a week, things like that. And I learned something. I brought something from outside of jiu-jitsu that I see sometimes people don't understand is this idea of how much percentage you're giving. Because guys, it's all motivational. We humans, we love to chase illusions. We love to chase illusions. We need to stop chasing the illusions of the mind. It's like an article I read today of a head of marketing from Mind Valley. She was talking about her previous career in nutrition, and she was like, it would be great if people just guided themselves by the scientific data that we have, what we know works, what we know is good, but they don't. They go after the televisions, commercials, and things like that because we are easily influenced. We need to stop that. Stop hearing to the illusions, to the marketing stuff, to the conversation that emotionally guides you into doing something, taking action. There's no such a thing as 110, 150, 1000%. Like Michael said, it's not real. And sometimes the best you can do, in my personal experience, is not even 100%. Why? Because if I am in a fight, I'm going to compete and I have 5 fights in my category. And I know I will, if I want to be a champion, to get a gold medal and to bring points to my team, so my team wins the competition because I don't win the competition, my team wins the competition. The thing is, if I give 100% in my first fight, in my second fight, I am already depleted. What will happen? If you ever fought in jiu-jitsu, you will know what I'm talking about, and you've been in your first competition, you will see that all this area here, you can't move your hands anymore. When the first fight ends, you can't move your hands anymore if you gave 100%. How are you going to fight the second fight? How are you going to fight the third fight? And how are you going to fight the fifth fight, which is with the best guy of the entire category that you are in? Sometimes your best is 60, 70, 80%, is the amount of energy that you can put into something so you know that you'll be able to finish the task, to deliver the purpose, the result that is expected. Because if you do your best in the first fight and then you can't fight the second fight, you didn't do your best after all. Does it make sense to you, Michael?
Yeah, I guess I see it in a different way. is that if I'm actually planning on actually going up a ladder during a competition, if I don't give 100% at the first level, I'm not going to make it to the second. So why would I hold back on the first, which may mean I fail, rather than giving everything I can in that moment? Doesn't mean I'm working harder. Doesn't mean that I'm actually like depleting myself. It's that I need to make sure that I'm giving my best, which may be with my heart, maybe with my mind more than with my body. But those two can be resources that can get depleted. So this is where the name of my company comes from, is to elevate your best, is to lead into this being the best version as you show up, is the training you did yesterday leads to what your best is going to be today. The knowledge and the wisdom that you have from the last 10 fights are going to bring you to this fight here. So I don't want to go into something saying, yeah, I'm going to give this 60% because I need to save the rest for the next fight. Because in my opinion, this life that we're in, I want to bring my best in every moment. So then I don't need to calculate whether I need to bring more or less in the next fight. Similarly, if I look back on my day, let's say I only gave 60% in that first fight and got knocked out of the competition, I'm gonna be kicking myself for the next year, 6 months, day, because I didn't give my best and I got kicked out of the competition. Instead of knowing I gave 100%, if I get kicked out, I know I still brought 100% of my best in that moment.
I understand what you're saying. And I think we are talking the same thing, because it really feels like you're giving your 100%. And to other people outside there, it feels like that as well. Like they see you putting there. But it's what I try to say. It's an experience that I have. It's like when you really commit too much, you feel it, like you feel the pain and everything. And I could do that. It's the control that you get, control, where you are putting, like you're giving your best. It is your best. You are competing at your best. You don't want to lose. You're putting a lot of energy, but somehow this best that you can give is not all that your body can give. That's what I'm trying to say. Like it's not all the strength that you have in your wrist. It's not actually the 100%. I don't know if I got it. And it might be that actually I'm wrong. I could be winning more fights than I imagine. But it's something that I learned in my experience, like the 100% that your body, everything that your body can give now, sometimes is not your best. Because if you do that, you will you need to calculate things in order to give the result, to achieve the purpose. That's what I'm trying to say.
I get where you're coming from, and but I've observed, and I've also heard other people say this as well, is whenever that's the calculation you're making is, can I get away with only giving 70%? Unfortunately, the name that came up in my head was David Goggins, and he's the grit guy. He's the ran a race on a sprained or broken ankle kind of guy, is push yourself to your limit because your body can take more than you think it can. So
Yes,
in some ways, it's that idea of where is the limitation? Is it in here or is it in your body? And your experience obviously is different than mine. I've never fought jujitsu. In fact, I've never really been in a full-on fist fight either. So I've never been in that fight or flight mode. I just want to caution people of it's that first person that I talked about was you hold back because you're afraid that others people are going to take advantage of you. You're afraid of giving too much because then you might not have enough. It falls into that category instead of actually bringing 100% when you go into it of the best you can in that moment. That doesn't always mean that you go to a point of depleting yourself. You're giving all you can for that. I did this with my fiance a couple weekends ago. We climbed a 4,000 footer, a 6-hour round trip hike, and we were busted up by the time we were done. We gave everything we had because one, we had to get back to the car because it's not like you can just sit down and say, I've given 60%, I'm going to give up now. But it does mean that you can take breaks in that. You can actually give yourself the rest in order to take the next leg of it. But I want to make sure that I'm actually pushing myself to when I need that break to do it consciously without holding back on myself and holding back on my own worth and my own value because of whatever reason is rattling around in my head.
I got you. And I'm sure that we are talking the same thing. I might have just used a reference that it's not familiar for you, so it causes wrong associations. And even this might even tell us that it was not a good reference for the audience. But that's exactly what you say. Like, you give your best, you give more than you believe, but it's, you are not, you know what to do. You are not depleting like your hands energy, because in the beginning we put too much strength into the hands. For example, we know how to dose. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not like you are not giving everything your body has, and it actually helps as well when to rest. When are the moments to rest? When I train into the academy, I give 1 minute rest. I need to be ready to fight a second fight the same way I fought the first one after 1 minute rest. And I train myself to do that 5 times. I need to be in my best. I need to do it 5 times, and I need to have 1 minute rest, like it's 30 seconds. But I need to be in 1 minute. I need to be ready in 1 minute to fight again and do my best again. That's what I'm trying to say. And I understand that is what you are saying, like climbing the mountain, giving your best. Like sometimes you think your body can't take it, but it can, much more than you imagine. And then you take the rest at the proper time and you continue your journey and focus on climbing the mountain, which is the purpose. I really believe we are talking the same things, Michael. We are just using references that confusing a little bit. You're the guy that climbs mountain. I'm the guy that trains jiu-jitsu and smash people on the ground.
Got it. And it's necessary. I think that's why we do this as a pair, because your references are going to meet with people differently than the ones that I do. And here's the thing too. I did the Habit of Ferocity, which is one of the other quests on Mind Valley, and they talk about training for the next big thing so that you can actually bring the ferocious side of you to this. And one of the things that he talks about during that quest is that when you're training, you're not, once again, you're not shooting for 150%. You're not looking for a 50% gain. It's in all of the studying that they did is that you aim for 4% growth. So if you're actually training to run, you're actually looking for 4% faster. If you're training to lift, you lift 4% more weight. If you're going for reading, you're going for 4% faster, because then it's not so overwhelming that you're actually going to give up, and it's not so underwhelming that there's no change, there's no transformation for it. And that is aiming for your best. It's looking for the limitations.
What is the rate? Like 4% in how much time?
So it is generally based on whatever that is. If it is reading, it's in a span of 10 minutes is try to read 4% faster, that you actually read 4% more words in that time frame. And by aiming to do that,
every time you do the task, you aim to go 4% higher.
That's what they found in the research was actually really how you attain the growth that's going to get you to where you need to go. You talked about the compound effect earlier as a book. That's another thing that they talk about is you're gaining 4% over time. Eventually that 4% becomes a very steep compound effect, because it is only 4%, but it's also 4%. And if you're talking about, your money, if you can see your money grow 4% by making wise investments, it's also, you're pushing yourself that much to check the boundary for what your best is.
And something that you mentioned as well that relates as well with this compound effect is the scarcity mindset that some people have, and this keeps them from doing their best, from actually trying. If you look at this 4% idea, how much can you grow? There's no limit. How far can you go? How much better can you get? Like, if I train jiu-jitsu every day, how much better can I get? There's no limit. It's the idea of the scarcity that many of us live from, and I have lived from that. It's all in our minds. What we actually experience in the universe is extreme abundance. Do you see that in your life, Michael?
I do see that whenever we're focusing on the growth rather than the lack. So when you're focusing on the wins, when you're focusing on, we talked about it when we talked about celebration, is when there's gratitude for what you're doing, it has a huge impact on when you're going to go back into it and do it again. when you're going to try that thing again, when you come from this place of abundance. There's lots of opportunities to learn to be patient. There are lots of opportunities to learn how to be a kinder person. That may not be that opportunity because someone else is being impatient or someone else is being unkind. So how do you bring your best to that on the emotional side of things? Because I think that it's falling right into the same thing, is that we're not just talking about lifting boulders or pushing cars or fighting jujitsu or running races. We're also talking about how do we interact with our culture? How do we interact with our loved ones? Are you bringing your best to that potential fight that you're going to have with your partner and instead turn it into a discussion? How do you bring that in your intellectual endeavors instead of beating yourself up because you can't figure it out, that your best may be asking for help? And that's where we get into, why would you even want to bring your best to everything that you do? What do you want by doing that? It's so that you can actually be more productive, so you can live with more happiness and joy in your life. Because there's this, I touched on it a little bit when we talked about holding back, is that if I have to second guess every single time I lay down in bed at night on whether I actually did the right thing, rather than knowing I did my best, I can sleep a whole lot better knowing if I gave everything I had in that moment to that particular project, that particular person, that experience.
Everything you say, Michael, kinds of makes me think one simple thing. Isn't that too distant from the crowd? People don't live like that. People don't actually experience those things that you mentioned right now. And we actually see people drifting into fear, living without purpose. I used to say, I think, because I actually experienced that for a long period of my life, quiet desperation. That's the state in which most people are. If they start to go after their best, won't they get away too much from the crowd?
Yes, and the way that I've heard this explained is the crab in the bucket process, where if you put a bunch of crabs in a bucket, that as soon as one crab starts climbing out, all the rest of the crabs drag them back in. And yes, this may happen. No, but oddly enough, whenever you are bringing this as your best in those emotional situations, those intellectual situations, those spiritual situations, you get to a place where you realize that maybe they are not the best for you. Some people talk about it as energy or vibration or spirit, is as you're actually growing yourself, sometimes you outgrow people. Sometimes, many times you'll outgrow experiences. You might even outgrow the teachings that you've had because they don't serve you anymore. And yes, you are going to stand out. For me, I just tend to stand out anyways because I'm 6'5" and a big guy. But I also don't want that to be the only thing that's the characteristic for me that stands out. I want to be someone who is taking a step forward in order to move my life forward from that. I think we talked about either last week or the week before, that growth mindset is something that my grandfather said, is that if I'm not growing every day, I'm doing something wrong. If I haven't learned something every day, I'm going to go look up something in the dictionary just to know something new for the day. So that's been ingrained in me in a really long time. And you may step out from the crowd, but oddly enough, it may be scary, but that's also where you're going to succeed, is whenever you are a little bit different than the person standing next to you. It's that being unique just like everyone else. So in that space, that quiet desperation you talked about is a suffering. It is a place where I've been there, where I was beating myself up because of the choices I've made, because of the places that I've put myself, the experience that I had didn't really match up to my expectations. I wasn't a happy person when I was there. I wasn't a good person to spend time with. People still did because I think we're in the same mindset of that fixed mindset of this is all I've got. This is the scarcity of money, love, time, energy, space, physicality, etc.
It's a conversation that keeps people feeling good, keeps them together. Oh, Let's complain a little bit.
That terminology of misery loves company. And that, to me, it's going to be harsh, but that to me is when you get into that, again, victim consciousness, when the world happens to me. I personally want to have I feel I have the capability to write my own story. And I want to lay out what at least the major milestones of where I want my life to go. And if I get into that state of misery of just complaining about everything, that is one of the key aspects of the characteristics of someone who's in a victim mindset. And I've got my sights set on where I want to succeed. And in order for me to get there, I don't feel that in a victim mindset, I'm going to get there. I want things to happen through me. I want things to happen by me. One of the things to happen as me, as Michael Bernard Beckwith talks about, is raising that level of consciousness to be more growth minded around this. Because there I feel I can have the best impact on the people I interact with, that they can be in a better state than the way that I found them.
So we can easily say that it is a characteristic of the person that wishes to give their best, to detach from the crowd, get away from what we call the culturescape, because we don't notice many times how many beliefs and how many aspects of our lives is decided by the culture that surrounds us. I am here in Brazil and I have different experiences and see life different from Michael, that lives in the USA, is born in Washington State. But for me, for us both, it's completely clear when we say, oh, let's compare this to somebody that is born into the Amazon in an indigenous tribe, a native from Amazon, or a native from those islands that we see above Australia. There are some natives there, like there is some tribe there. It's completely different. It is different from the guy that is born in Egypt and in India. There are things that I can easily do here and people can easily do here, which is considered normal, that if somebody does in India, there will be great consequences because it's not supposed to do, and everybody knows that. So this is what Nietzsche says, the Übermensch, the person that gets out of the crowd, gets out of the herd and finds its own path. That's what all those conversations are about, right, Michael? About helping people get out of the plane, like the faceless crowd, and find your authenticity, find your purpose, and start to actually go after doing your best in whatever it is that you are aiming to do.
Absolutely. And that really is the focus of this podcast. This is the focus of my coaching practice, is helping people see where they can step outside of potentially all the conditioning that they've had up to this point and be themselves in the best version of themselves possible. So if you've liked this conversation up to this point and you're ready for that growth mindset, make sure that you hit subscribe and like down below so you can actually hear more about these conversations that we're having. So next I want to shift into, why don't people get to this space? Why would you not do your best? How does that show up? So there's a couple of places that come to mind. So human beings like comfort. It's a default context that many human beings fall back to. Someone like David Goggins is not one of those people, but as a whole, as a stereotype for human beings, we like comfort. We don't like doing things that take us out of our comfort zone. And many times that shows up as being lazy or tired or depleted or depressed. So that may be why people don't show up with their best. Or maybe you feel like you're actually climbing a ladder going up the wrong wall. Maybe you're working too hard for an end that you're not bought into. Now, if you are doing a job or a task or in a relationship or an exercise routine that you don't feel like is going to get you to the end result, you're not going to give your best to it because there's this limitation in your head. You're not going to stay with that nutrition plan because you're like, yeah, this is a bunch of BS. I'm not going to do this workout because it's not like I'm going to get stronger or lose weight or whatever that goal is. So how instead do we actually shift that? How do we actually see that the steps we're taking are heading in the direction we want to go, rather than saying, hey, I'm just going to be in that fixed mindset of I'm happy the way things are. Are you? Some people may very well be. I've put in my 80 years of this life and I am happy just the way that I am. Is that your best? If you've had experiences over the last 80 years, that's wisdom that can be passed on to the next generations, not just one, but two or three. That may be how you always do your best, is by sharing wisdom, because that's the beauty of getting wisdom, is that you now have the opportunity to teach it to someone else, so that potentially they don't run into the same hurdles and pitfalls that you did. But there's also this other piece of this too, is if you are go all the time and you are giving 110%, 150%, you're also not making sure that your cup is full so you have enough to give. My favorite saying for this that I hear probably far too often is, in the case of a crash in an airplane, put your oxygen mask on first before you help the person next to you. Primarily because if I focus on helping you and I'm able-bodied and can help you, and I end up being unconscious because I don't put the mask on myself, what would happen if the reverse were true, that I put my mask on and I can help 5 people, rather than let's choose to help this one person and sacrifice myself in the process? So you've got to make sure that you're making sure that your cup is full, that your basic needs are met, so that you can bring your best in every moment after.
Another thing that might be keeping people from giving their best, Michael, is the culture surrounded the 40 hours work week, because it just drains from people. Of course, there are people that have nice jobs, nice structure, nice culture into the companies. But I really believe there is a great work to be done in human society, which is to change the baseline culture. Like, how many things don't we do effortlessly? Nobody keeps struggling. If I'm going to go to college, am I gonna do my SLTs? Am I gonna find a job? Nobody wastes energies like that. Most of the people are into the current, into the river, into this point. Like, they are on the automatic. They go to the school, sometimes not willingly. They don't do a good job. Some of them really put the effort, and they go throughout this entire journey. What I believe that we should do, that is a work to be done, is to establish a baseline culture where we, me, you, and the future generations, we worry first about setting up the mindset of growth into people, of curiosity, of finding a purpose, of contributing, and learning, because learning is a skill. You learn how to learn. And if you know how to learn, you can get any subject and you just dive into. Like Bill Gates that I mentioned before, he's a great learner. So he has the knowledge of how to find information, how to seek that information. And he is not an expert in many areas, but he has general knowledge to talk with experts into many areas and to have meaningful conversations. So this 40-hour work week, I believe it's something that keeps people from doing their best as well. The entire culture scape, because we are used and we are educated to live into mediocrity, to live into the average, to live a life that is normal. It's not usually our best. We are not encouraged to do our best. Do you think that society encouraged people to do their best, Michael?
I think that you use the word mediocrity, and it is also the idea of being average. And for some people, they're okay being average. And
Yeah.
there's others that are not okay being average. And I like the idea that you talked about, building in that meta learning, that learning how to learn, as well as the curiosity that goes with it. in software development, I've certainly seen where people just are not curious to poke around in the corners to see what things can happen. That idea of experimenting, being a scientist in life rather than being a researcher. So I very much think that is a way for us to fall down into the average of things. And I think that everyone has an area where they're extraordinary. I think everyone has an opportunity to show their best, show their strengths. And I know that we've talked about that a little bit as well, is there's this gift that each person has. And sometimes it's really difficult to find that for us. It's very difficult for us to define what that is. And instead, we end up harping on all of our weaknesses. You know, you talked about the school system, the education system doesn't necessarily play to people's strengths. And it's that adage of if you keep judging a fish by the way he climbs a ladder, you'll think he's an idiot for his whole life. There's things that we do have more skill and more capabilities in. And it's a matter of leveraging and finding those. There's, I can't remember, I think it's Sean Stevenson. There's a bodybuilder that I've been referred to a couple of times who can do some amazing things, but he has no legs and he's missing an arm. But he's a bodybuilder. If you want to talk about limitations, look at that kind of concept of what is he capable of, because his mindset is that I'm going to not be average. I'm not going to let this particular disability, this lack of appendages, going to slow me down from being in the best possible shape I can. So not that everyone has to fall into that, but I do ask each of you to look at where can you bring your best? Where are you actually holding back where you could bring your best, and maybe put a smile on somebody else's face? Maybe feel that fulfillment that you've been putting off, that you've been procrastinating because of the fear that's rolling around in your head. You know, where is that space where maybe it's researching for a little bit more knowledge? If you're listening to this, you have access to the internet, and there is so much knowledge out there that's available, and so many different people are teaching how to do things. It's a matter of starting somewhere to then take that knowledge and turn it into wisdom. And so I challenge you to seek that area where it lights you up and you are curious about it. Find it, search for it, be a seeker for that, and you'll see how your life can shift, how your life can change, how your life will transform.
And it's not about being a superhero. Of course, some of us might want to be a superhero, but sometimes you do get on some heroic missions and you do take some heroic actions, but it's not about that. That's not what we are talking about here today. It might be, for example, like Michael said, if you decide to be a programmer, if you decide to be a developer, and you don't have the curious mindset, the willing to explore, to go and to look for alternatives, you might be on the wrong path. Because if you are a programmer, that explorer, that curiosity, that drive to solve problems, it is essential to be a good developer. But if you are just like on the paths that are already known, perhaps you can give your best and be the best at doing something that is already there. You are a programmer, Michael. I believe that in order for you to be a programmer, you need to have that exploration thing. You need to be willing to go after it. And that's what we are saying about do your best. Know what is required from you. If you are a father and by some chance you are stay-home dad and your partner is out there working, and you have to be there. In this moment, I will be on the role of the dad. That's your focus, your purpose on that moment. Do your best. Be with your kid. Don't be on your phone. That's what we are talking about. Don't be lazy. Don't procrastinate. If you have something to do, decide to take on the action. And when you take on the action, do your best. Be present. Be there. Not let things just fall into places, and the way they fell, it's the way they are going to be. It's not how we should live life. And what a waste it is when you are living your life just, that's what we like to call it, drifting, because you're just reacting. You're just like drifting into something. Don't be drifting. Set up the sail and go for the best destination that you can think of. That's doing your best. I don't know if you agree, Michael.
So I certainly think that I think you touched on a point that I really appreciate as well, is that no one can tell you what your best is. Only you know what that is. Also, no one can tell you what you can bring your best to, only that. If in this moment you're a janitor, or you are a personal care assistant, or an Uber driver, or whatever it is that you're choosing to do, we're asking you to bring your best to that, rather than having a life that you need to take a vacation from. Is bring your attitude also being the best as you're moving into it. And it may be that's the thing that you're doing for now. Yes, I've been a programmer. I'm looking at other ventures and becoming a coach as well. And I'm going to bring my best in the programming world as well as a coach. I'm also going to do my best in my relationship and being a dad and my spiritual journey. All of those things I want to make sure that I'm bringing my best to. And some of that requires me to know where I'm at. And some of that is required for me to not only put the wisdom in my heart and my mind, but also record your progress. Know how far you've come. Write down your lessons of be a scientist in your life. Okay, trial number 373, I did it like this, and this was the outcome. Trial 374, I did this, and this was the outcome. So then you can actually bring your best to the next situation that you come into that. Be the scientist, be the experimenter to try that on, and use that information. Hopefully you learn it to a point where you can also bring that knowledge to someone else. If it's actually somebody that you meet on the street, if it's a family member, if it's a kid or a parent, I can't tell you the number of times that the little things that I learn that seem relatively simple to me, relatively inconsequential, that whenever I bring that knowledge to someone else, it can change their day. It can be that one thing that they needed in order to get past that one thing that frustrated them so much. It doesn't always need to be something that is earth-shattering.
Yeah. And if you do all that, you will avoid frustration. You will avoid regrets and feelings of guilt for not having actually done the best what you could do. If you share with other people, like Michael said, that is a great hack in the human mind, because as we already spoken, we are wired to work into communities, into groups. And when we benefit the groups, our own mind, it kinds of gets those rewards, those emotional rewards. We need to remember we are trillions of beings, trillions of individual organisms working together. We need to talk to those organisms and say, hey, you know what? We are doing this for the group, look, and they will be happy and they will be like, nice.
It's a matter of having the teamwork basically for all the organisms that make up our body and our gut biome and all the neurons and pieces that are there. And it's also then, as we build the systems, we are that one human being in a larger system of a family system, a work system, a community system, for sure. And a lot of this is the learning process. And like I talked about, recording what your progress is. It's also something we touched on a little bit before we got started here, was learning what primes you to do your best. If I know that I'm going to be going into a job interview first thing in the morning, me staying up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning out drinking to have a hangover the next morning is not going to lead me to bring my best to that interview. So know what your patterns are and what leads you to actually show up in the way that you want to show up to get the results you're looking for. It's another way you bring your best, is you ensure that the decisions that I'm going to make now will impact my tomorrow, will impact my next week, will impact my next year, and potentially the 7 generations that follow you. So making those decisions wisely is another way we can actually shift. How are you bringing your best? Is knowing the impact that you're going to make and have that be part of what you're going to show up with. Is it going to be really helpful for me to get really upset and angry and scream at a 4-year-old because they actually just threw a bunch of stuff on the floor? Probably not, because then they're just going to learn to be afraid of somebody who's screaming. That doesn't help them, because it's a teaching moment that we just missed.
And what you said about knowing how you feel, knowing how to bring your best, kind of remind me of journaling. I believe who was it? Somebody, I don't remember who it was. I don't remember who it was, but the person said that they were in the habit of journaling, and they started to realize that there were some days, like it was Wednesday, something like that. The person was always performing a little bit bad into the end of the day. The person was not feeling so good. So he went into his journal and he looked there. What is happening here? What is the pattern? And he realized that every Wednesday he would lunch with a group of friends, old friends from high school. It was 3 friends that he always met, and he started noticing what happened into those lunches, and he started taking notes, and he realized that the conversation was always some nostalgia about the past, why things are going bad. The typical conversation that we mentioned before, Michael, the complaining of how things are not going so well as I would like them to go, and the blaming of other entities outside of yourself for what is actually your responsibility. And he actually decided to cut that lunch that he has been through many years. And he decided, I don't know how he kept up on those friendships, but he decided to cut on that lunch, and he said that his performance increased. He stopped feeling bad on Wednesdays. So journaling is a great tool if you are into this moment where you don't actually know what makes you better, what brings your best out. Don't actually know what puts you down. You're not aware. It is important for you to be aware, because you can easily cut those things. I'm going through jiu-jitsu, and there's a friend of mine that it's on the path of the place where we train. And every time I'm like, hey, let's be there 10 minutes after the training starts, so we get there on time. And yesterday I had a conversation with this friend that I say to her, you know what? When she got there, she actually got on time. The moment that I decided to talk to her, she got on time. But it was like, hey, I'm always coming here on time, and I wait for 10, 15 minutes. You know what this makes to me? This makes me feel confused and in doubt, and I put a lot of energy. I have to pick up my phone. I have to send you a message. I got worried. And then you say that you'll be here in that much time. This process takes out energy from me, and that is not an energy that I'm willing to give. I want to get here, get you on time, and go to the gym and not worry a little bit about it. It's supposed to be effortless. Everything in your life, effortless. You just go and you do already what to do. Leave your mind, subconscious mind, to do the thing. No things out of place, no unpredictability into the place, if you can take it out. So you got to notice those things, and you got to have those conversations with the people that are around your life. You know what? This wastes my energies. This doesn't bring me my best. This leaves me worried and upset that I'm here 10, 15 minutes waiting. So this brings me down, and I don't want that. Make those decisions. Those are important. Seems like you're being a jerk, but it is your life. And you might actually realize later, you know what, I've been a jerk here. It's not necessary. But if it's something for me, if I'm 4 times a week going to a place to meet a person, I'm there on time, the person know the time I'm going to be there, and every day I wait for 10, 15 minutes for that person to come, and the person is like leaving 100 meters away from the place that we schedule, I'm going to talk to that person, and I'm going to tell, hey, you know what? You either be here on time, or you can find your own way to the gym. Yeah. Know what brings your best. Know what brings your best, and know what brings your worst, and decide to be on your best side.
It is really that preparation factor, is know what factors you can put in order to bring out the best results that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And that's, once again, that's why it's elevate your best, so that you actually bring that in the next moment and the next moment and the next moment. And then in that present moment, when you're there, that's what this is talking about, is that bring what you got, bring what you packed, bring the energy and the wisdom and the knowledge and the skills and the tools that you have with you. And that it is that two-edged sword is you got to deal with what you have in front of you too. You have to work with the resources you have and not second guess that either. And looking back and saying, I didn't do as well as I could. If I had this and this, it could have been so much better. Awesome. You know that for the next time.
Exactly. And go after those things. Don't be like, oh my God, I don't have those things. This is like the 3MIQ, right, Michael? You list the experiences. It's an exercise, the 3MIQ. You list the experiences that you wish to have in life. And those are not things that you are living right now. Those are things that you want to live. And the next thing that you do is that you list how you need to grow in order to live that. What do you need to acquire? What are the tools that are going to be necessary for you to move forward in that direction? It is part of your process of the preparation, like Michael mentioned.
And there's this other dark part that could potentially come in here too. And I know in competitions, in running clubs, in programming jams, is also realize that my best is going to be different than Bruno's best. It's going to be different than this person's best. So this isn't a matter of, at least for me, it's not a matter of me competing against anyone else. For me, where I'm at right now, I'm not going to be able to keep up with Bruno in the gym. He's in far better cardio shape than I am because he is working out a lot more than I am. And I need to know that my best is going to be different than his. In the same fashion that my experience in programming has been for the last 20 years. So I've got different skills than he does. So him trying to compete against the knowledge and wisdom that I've gained doesn't serve him and it doesn't serve me. It may be an opportunity to ask someone for help, but is not an opportunity to judge yourself on whether it's not my best against yours. It's my best in this moment, in this present moment. If we're going to go back to The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle is another book that is on my reading list as well, is being present now. And now, this is my best here now. Because that's where I have the most impact. I cannot change anything in the past. I can certainly prepare for the future, but I don't know what's going to happen between now and then. So the only moment I can really affect is now.
I believe it's the yogis that say that eternity is now. And I heard that and I think, okay, that's true. Because if I say tomorrow, I will fix my bike, it's with some problem. When it gets tomorrow, the only way I can fix my bike is if in any moment I decided that now I'm going to fix my bike. There's no tomorrow. There's no yesterday. There's only now. And it is like that philosophical thing that where does it go? But it's true. You actually only live now. And we as humans, we have this insane, amazing, incredible ability of communication, which is that we are doing right now. With communication, we not only remember in the genes, because there are some things that we remember through the genes, like there was an experiment, it was with rats. They put some fragrancy into a cage, and every time the fragrancy show up, they gave a little shock into the rats. And they discovered that through generations, even if they didn't give the shock, when the sons of those rats felt the smell of the fragrancy they would use it with their fathers, they got scared. They never took a shock, but they got scared. We have this amazing ability of communication, and this allows us to learn with the past and plan for the future. But we can't live locked into the past, because this is maybe guided by trauma. You have some trauma, and there you are in the past, limited by those experiences that you had. And we can't just live into the future, because this is daydreaming. It's just, oh, let's make some fantasies. What if it was like that? You need to learn with the past so you don't commit the same mistakes and you go to the right direction. And you need to plan, create a vision for the future that guides you into living the best now that you can do every time.
Absolutely. So I certainly think that us being aware of it is different than living there. You can only live in the present. You can never live in the past, and you can't live in the future. You can only live in the now. So
Uh-huh.
another way to shift this, I know that Bruno mentioned the yogis, is in order for us to start doing this more often, to be able to bring our best, is also looking to see how other people are potentially getting there and learning from their choices and their mistakes, and then adding our own spin on it, adding our own twist on it, because success leaves clues. So not saying, once again, we're not competing, we're learning. We're actually finding mentors. If it's from a book, a YouTube, a coach, a teacher, a therapist, that can allow us to let go of some of our past and prepare better for the future. We are a communal species. We learn from each other. We mimic each other, sometimes to our detriment. But this is an opportunity to then choose who you're going to mimic, who you're going to surround yourself with, what information you're going to put in, so that you can actually learn what your next best is.
Exactly. And this learning with others is something really cool called modeling. I believe it's Tony Robbins. This phrase is from him as well. Success leaves clues. I believe it's him. I don't know. But the idea is that every time you learn somebody and you, instead of finding out yourself, you don't need to go find out yourself. You don't need to start from the scratch. If you wish to do something that many people done, even if it's something real, like scaling a company to billions of dollars of value in the market value. This is something very few people done, but are there people that did this? They have. What is the path that they took? That's what you need to go there. And Tony has a great example where he was in the beginnings of the studies of modeling, and he was working with this guy that was very important. He was a coronel or something like that, psychiatrist, very recognized person, and he was working with this guy. And they went to work with this group of the best shooters in the world, like an elite group of something, and those guys were there. And this colonel that was going to give the training had to be summoned elsewhere. And he said to Tony, go there and teach the guys how to shoot better. And Tony's like, are you crazy? I never shoot a gun before. And so go there about modeling. You have done the studies, you know what to do. And Tony went there, and those guys that were like officials, like guys were warriors, and they were like looking to Tony, what's this guy doing? And then Tony started working with them and asking were they thinking as they shot and things like that. And those guys were losing their patience. What is this guy doing here? And then Tony decided to tell them, after questioning, understanding the process, decided, hey, move this target to like very close, like 20 feet away. And the guys were very offended. We are the best shooters in the world, and you are telling us to hit the target 20 feet away or something like that. And he was like, do it. And they've done it for many times. And after that, when they put the target back where they were before, they had an amazing 20-something increase in accuracy. And what happened is that Tony realized that when they were shooting, they would create a mental practice of visualizing the target closer. So he actually took the target closer. It is modeling. It's what are they doing? What is the people that have success doing? What are the best shooters in the world doing as they shoot? They imagine that the target is closer. The target is closer. So Tony got that, and then he said, let's try to see if putting actually the target closer, when we put it back there, is this going to increase? And it increased. This is modeling. Modeling is kind of research. You look at what people that have your result, the result that you wish to have, are doing, and you try to think like they do and see what happens.
So just to play with the words a little bit. So at least for me, the term modeling is what I do. So hopefully someone else will learn, versus mimicry is when you're actually doing what someone else is doing. So it sounds like there's a little bit of both in here around this. So there is the observing what people are doing, and then understanding what's underneath it, and then figuring out what is that little twist, that little change that you need to do. So it's one of the things that Tony Robbins is actually really good at, is that neuro-linguistic programming, that learning how to change someone's patterns, to do a pattern interrupt because he can observe what they're doing and where the stop is, no matter what the subject is that they're having trouble with, because the human brain, the human psyche tends to be pretty consistent with how it shows up in certain circumstances, and learning how you can actually shift that. But odd that someone who is an expert can trust another expert in a different field to do their job for them, because it wasn't about shooting in that case. It was
Yeah,
about the mindset.
that's what the point. Like that's what exactly what you say. Though the guys from the army, they were like, "What is this guy doing? He never shot a gun before. How can he teach me how to be better at my job?" But learning, like you said at some point, Michael, back then, meta learning, right? The meta learning, the modeling, it is learning how to learn. It's learning what is it that you need to observe into other people in order to duplicate that. And this is actually related, very related to elevating your best, to committing to give your best, because of the simple fact. And if you take something from this part of the conversation, it's this: you don't need to start from the scratch. You don't need to start from the scratch. And that's the thing that I spoke about, building a baseline culture for humanity as well. Humanity doesn't need to start from the scratch. Imagine if you could start with the basic things that you know work. And if you want to venture into any area, whatever it might be cooking, it might be climbing a mountain, it might be doing jiu-jitsu, it might be scaling a company to $100 million. Whatever you do, there are people that, if there is people that did that before, you can look into them and try to observe them, and you will find things to model, things to duplicate, things to continue from. Don't start from the scratch, because sometimes the journey is just too big. That's what keeps you as well from giving your best. Perhaps you are starting from the scratch in everything you want to do. Start from what is known.
Right.
Use the collective knowledge, community knowledge.
Absolutely. So as we look at wrapping this up, so we've now gone through all 4 agreements. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. And now always do your best. So what kind of shift can you see in your life by doing this? There's a couple of things that I see that I've experienced. Is I actually personally sleep better at night, because I'm not second guessing what I'm doing. I'm not trying to make up what somebody else is thinking in their own head. I'm not taking that comment that someone said personally, and I say what is on my mind, and I follow through on what I say I'm going to do in every possible moment that I can. That's my goal. So it also, for me, I feel like I'm living an extraordinary life. I've got people around me who support me. I've got work that I do that I enjoy. I've got a home that I actually am still building on, but quite happy with where I'm at, because I've actually incorporated these 4 agreements into my life. It's also, there's this fulfillment, this underlying satisfaction that comes from this idea that I can let some of those other stories, those other agreements, those other standards go, because these in many ways trump them. It's really hard to break a habit or change a belief unless you have something to go to. It's not like I can just say, I'm going to stop doing this, or I'm going to stop believing that, because the universe doesn't hear that. The universe doesn't hear the don't, the not, the no. You have to move to something, not from something. So that comes to that idea of living in the present. So for me, that's where that extraordinary life is, that in this present moment, I find the satisfaction and the fulfillment in the task that I'm taking, because I am always doing my best.
And you also sleep better. You mentioned that before. If you commit to your best, at the end of the day, when there are things that are unsolved in the end of our day, our mind keeps running. And it's hard to put a stop to it, because it's worried there are things that we should have done and we didn't. We could have done better. And when we do our best, it's actually pretty calming. We just, even if we didn't achieve the results necessary, we look back to our days and we feel satisfaction, just like what you say. You feel that anticipation of I am on the right path, I am doing the right things, and everything's going to be okay. And it's actually another good thing. We should talk about this, like just saying to yourself, everything's going to be okay, cultivating that belief into your mindset. And if you are doing your best, it is easy to tell yourself everything's going to be okay, and you will sleep much better, live a better life, right, Michael?
That's the goal. So
That's the goal.
in our final words, so for those of you who have stuck it out to the very end, thank you very much for sticking around. We really appreciate it. If you've gotten this far, you better have already had, at least we hope you had some nugget that have actually made it so it's worth it. As well as if you want to hear more about what we're talking about with the Elevate Your Best podcast, please subscribe, follow up with us. If you have comments, leave them. There'll be some information in the show notes here as well for you to follow up with us if you want to. We really appreciate you spending some time with us. My name is Michael Danklas of Elevate Your Best.
I am Bruno Martins from the Cyber Journey, and we are preparing some very nice things for you. I hope you like it. And yeah, that's it for today.
Thank you, Bruno. Have a fantastic day. Peace out.
You too, Michael. Bye bye. Bye bye, guys.